Rillaboom to help it out there with a fake out against the Miraidon. But we're actually just going to see restricted left, right, and center out of the blocks. It's going to be Zamazenta and Calyrex Shadow Rider for Marco Silva, the Miraidon, and that Ogerpon Teal Mask for Eric Rios.
Well, Ogerpon joins the match right away after all, is here but looking a little bit vulnerable to both of these Pokemon. Meanwhile, Miraidon can go quick out on the offense. You have to be a little bit thoughtful about how. While Snarl might seem nice, there's some risk it would get wide guarded, and is very easy to switch into, so you might just be pressuring normal electric offense into Calyrex. Meanwhile, Calyrex can just go for Astral Barrage. There's no immediate threat of KO likely, and so especially if a Rillaboom were to come into Zamazenta's spot, you could force out the Astral Barrage and maybe really significant damage into both of these Pokemon.
Definitely some decisions for this Calyrex to make, and you can see Eric's really pondering on what the Ogerpon wants to do. It's the only non-restricted on in the field right now, and it does have some utility with something like a Taunt, as you said, to potentially even shut down a nasty plot that Calyrex could go for. The seconds tick through, but Calyrex on Marco's side is just going to go for the defensive play, a little protect at the beginning of this match, as Ogerpon also decides to take that boat and go for a spiky shield, so not going to be utilizing any offensive pressure here. Instead, that's down to Miraidon, and it's going to go for that Volt Switch to do 50% to the opposing Zamazenta and get out of there, allowing Eric to reposition. Zamazenta still to move though, so depending on his choice of target, it could get some damage on the board, but Volcarona coming in, a great choice in the face of a potential body press.
Yeah, wherever body press would land, it would not be great right now. Let's see what Zamazenta does, but good targeting from Eric to get the Volt Switch off into Zamazenta.
Yeah, Volcarona able to take that really well, a nice switch in.
So Calyrex protects itself, but no attacks are going in that slot anyway. Instead, it's very significant damage into Zamazenta and Miraidon successfully escaping the field, not having to take a body press. And Volcarona, one of the difference makers possibly in this match, in how it shifts the view for one Zamazenta compared to the other. Able to come in here and take that body press so well, not just take the damage well, but have incurred risk for Marco that it would have been a flame body burn that would have been really devastating this position. But now something's changed where the Calyrex really wasn't being stopped from Astral Barrage, but is just going to switch out anyway, worried about the target coming into that slot and threatening a KO.
Yep, keep your Calyrex nice and safe in the back, and Ogerpon on Marco's side can join the field. We're also going to see a Terrestrialization nice and early on in this top 4 match. It's going to be on that Ogerpon, so this is going to be getting all the sparkles on the field and giving it critically that speed boost, enabling a lot of offensive pressure on Eric's side of the field. So maybe it can try and get some damage down with something like the Ivy Cudgel and get the edge over Marco's team. Ogerpon, however, it's going to fail with the attack choice it's going into here, as the Volcarona can go for that Quiver Dance. So it's also going to get a little bit of cheeky setup.
Ogerpon used the Terrestrialization to get the speed advantage and tried to encore the Calyrex in to protect again, but it was just a switch. Ogerpon comes in and doesn't worry about the encore. Would have been a safe switch into Ivy Cudgel as well. Meanwhile, Zamazenta puts really huge damage down into Ogerpon on the other side, but this is what we've seen from Eric. When you're too worried about that other spot, one slot running away from Ogerpon, the other slot trying to put damage into Ogerpon. In that meantime, Volcarona gets the Quiver Dance, starts to look like a threat by itself.
Yeah, once that Volcarona starts setting up, it can really deal some damage with something like a Fiery Dance. That's something that the Zamazenta has to really contend with, but of course, it does not want to be too tempted to go for that Terrestrialization and leave itself vulnerable for later in the match when that Miraidon can come back in.
Has to watch out for the possible follow-up from Miraidon in the future, but for now, a Terrestrialization being spent from Marco's side, going to be the Ogerpon. Both Ogerpons Terrestrializing so far in this match.
Really love to see this, showcasing what an Ogerpon can do. Now, the Embody aspect on Ogerpon's side, on Marco's side, is going to be able to get that attack boost. And in the face of a Grass-type Ogerpon, that can be doing some formidable damage with an Ivy Cudgel. Volcarona saying, I don't want any part in this action right now, just going for a protect, as is the Zamazenta. So possibly we could be looking to the Ogerpon to be duking it out with their Ivy Cudgels. Ogerpon actually goes for the Taunt here, shutting down anything that the opposing Ogerpon can go for here, such as a Follow Me, but the Ogerpon on Marco's side was trying to get that damage down into Volcarona, but to no avail here. Some decent plays here from Eric, just shutting down the potential of that opposing Ogerpon.
Marco has seen the risk of letting Volcarona set up too easily and just swings at it in a huge way. The Embody aspect boosted, Terrestrialize boosted Ivy Cudgel going into Volcarona, but for this turn at least, Eric successfully protects that. Volcarona keeps the boost around. Ogerpon gets a taunt down that may not be that impactful, but at least you don't have to worry about Follow Me coming out this turn.
Yep, meaning you can freely target that Zamazenta if you want to, but Ogerpon says no, my target is literally my opponent opposite me. Volcarona spins around, a beautiful Fiery Dance finds its mark into Zamazenta and takes the first KO in this game 1. Zamazenta is down and out for the count for Marco Silva. as the Ogerpon is able to go for the Ivy Cudgel of its very own. This will find its mark down onto the Volcarona and remove it from the field. So taking out that Quiver Dance Volcarona, that could be nice for Marco.
It may have done its job, though. It switched into a body press, boosted itself faster than Zamazenta, and then KO'd Zamazenta. So it's a three-step plan for a lot of success against Zamazenta. Meanwhile, Eric Zamazenta completely healthy in the back, Miraidon also completely healthy in the back. And now that the Ogerpon on the other side has dropped its grass typing, pretty vulnerable to the Miraidon as it comes in here. Grassy Terrain, though, going to undo Electric Terrain right as it happens, and just make sure Miraidon doesn't have too much offensive firepower. Definitely something like a Volt Switch is not enough to pick up the KO onto Ogerpon, so you have to be a little bit worried. The Ogerpon on Eric's side doesn't have a great target for Ivy Cudgel, but it still can try to Encore or Taunt and be as disruptive as it was trying to be earlier, or it may just leave the field and save that speed boost to be helpful against the Calyrex that we know is still lurking in the back.
That's true, and of course you know you have the fake out potential here. That's what the Rillaboom has gone for, just to stop the powerhouse that is indeed that Miraidon from moving in this turn, as this speedy Ogerpon on Eric's side is going to be able to Ivy Cudgel first once again, comes out from behind the mask, tries to get the knockout on the opposing Ogerpon, but to no avail, and the Ogerpon on Marco's side now free to retaliate in the same way, but instead of targeting the opposing Ogerpon, it goes for the Miraidon. No critical hit coming through to do that additional damage, and now the grassy terrain the Rillaboom kindly set up is going to recuperate some HP across the board.
So resisted, Ivy Cudgels exchanged significant damage on both sides, but no KOs. The Ogerpon looks like it's in range for Ivy Cudgel KO. Miraidon also in range for Ivy Cudgel KO. I think pretty important what Miraidon opts to do here. The Ogerpon on Marco's side is going to be pretty tempted to protect, either stop an Ivy Cudgel or an electric move from picking up that KO. And then what can you do to the Rillaboom in the meantime? Miraidon can throw a Draco Meteor there, but there's no electric terrain, there's no choice specs. It's not going to be the same significant damage.
Spiky Shield just coming up straight away on this Ogerpon, knows that it's vulnerable to something that the Miraidon can throw its way, and the Rillaboom taking that priority and going for the Grassy Glide. It actually targets down into the Ogerpon, removes onto the field. It is nice and speedy thanks to the speed boost it got from the Embody aspect, so nice to remove that from play and force Eric to bring in the last remaining Pokemon from the back. Rillaboom, however, does leave itself vulnerable to the Miraidon, but Miraidon was targeting down into that Ogerpon, I think hoping to try and get a KO, but instead, Miraidon sticking on the field.
Yeah, putting a Volt Switch there, hoping to both get a KO and reposition to get the electric terrain back. But with the protection now and the KO onto Ogerpon, Grassy Terrain is locked in. Miraidon's not going to have an opportunity to re-establish the electric terrain, and is now locked into Volt Switch for the rest of this game.
Oh, that's
pretty
true.
low damaging move, so a lot rested on being able to actually land that Volt Switch in the last turn.
Yep, and the Grassy Glide can also be capitalized on by the Ogerpon, so it's going to be able to try and get some damage into that opposing Miraidon. As you said, Volt Switch is the choice that's locked into. It is going to be enough to be able to get the KO on the Ogerpon, but Marco still has the Calyrex in the back that can rejoin the fray and try and get the damage out on the board. Zamazenta can go for the body press into the Rillaboom, does do a huge amount of damage, but leaves Rillaboom free to go for the U-turn that will guarantee the knockout on the Miraidon, not only allow it to switch back out, but as it will replace the fallen Comrade on the opposing side, then it will be enabling that fake out in that next turn.
Right, it enables a fake out, a nasty plot next turn. It means the Calyrex should have plenty of offense to finish off the Zamazenta on this side, the last remaining Pokemon for Eric. It looks like Marco's in a pretty comfortable spot to finish this game off.
Yeah, really great positioning here from Marco's side. Rillaboom comes back in, as you said, you can go for the fake out, the nasty plot, and find a really nice way to deal with the Zamazenta. Eric knows that's exactly the play, sends the forfeit in, and Marco moves one game closer to the final. One game closer to being able to battle against his roommate for this tournament in Federico, and Eric needs to be able to find a way to even the score to keep himself in the game and in the tournament.
It was really interesting to see both Ogerpons end up Terastallizing in this match. At first, the Ogerpon for Eric seemed like it was having such a huge impact. Scared the Calyrex off the field, was putting down big Ivy Cudgel damage, but ultimately, Eric kind of got stuck in the position. The Miraidon wasn't doing enough, the Ogerpon wasn't doing enough back. Either spent two Ivy Cudgels onto the Ogerpon on the other side without actually getting a KO out of it, and then that just left the Ogerpon to protect itself with Volt Switch and kind of ice the position where Miraidon was never able to leave the field.
I think that's very valid. The Ogerpon here, as lovely as it was to see the Terastallization and get that speed boost up for the advantage, it just wasn't able to do any damage with that position. You particularly have this, a fire type and a grass type against you. The Ivy Cudgels, yes, they're moving first, but they're not being significant enough on the board. And just due to some of the priority options that Marco had with the Grassy Glide apiece, that just gave him a lot more momentum to start closing out that first game.
Right, the double Grassy Glide is part of that priority that we talked about before the game that can finish off low health targets like the Miraidon ended up being. I'll be interested to see what the pivot is now. The Volcarona looked like it was starting to have the same impact that we've seen in previous games. Got the Quiver Dance up, I think probably did its job in KOing the Zamazenta, but it wasn't able to carry the entire team. It was relegated to only doing that specific job, and the rest of the team couldn't follow through.
But once again, we're seeing a plethora of restricteds out on the field. Eric Rios leading front and center with the Zamazenta and Miraidon, his 2 restricteds out there, battling it out against the Rillaboom and the Calyrex Shadow Rider from Marco Silva.
So the Electric Terrain immediately lost for the Miraidon on Eric's side, but still has the speed advantage against Calyrex. Has to worry about Fake Out coming into that slot, because Zamazenta can also kind of protect from any damage with Wide Guard. It might be easy to go for a Protect and Nasty Plot play, or I'm sorry, excuse me, a Fake Out into Miraidon and Nasty Plot play on this turn. Zamazenta can't do a ton to punish that, can put some damage back into Calyrex, possibly enough damage to open up Calyrex for a KO in a future turn, but that's where we're going to start. Fake Out into Miraidon. Let's see what comes next.
Well, it's not going to be the Nasty Plot. Instead, just straight on the offensive for Calyrex with an Astral Barrage. We'll connect on both Pokemon, put them straight down into the orange zone very early doors in this game. We know Miraidon cannot move, but Zamazenta is able to capitalize here and go straight down into that opposing Calyrex. A big amount of damage on the board.
Gets a lot of damage, definitely opens up that Calyrex to be KO'd by Miraidon on this turn, and no Fake Out left, but Calyrex is just free to protect itself. Zamazenta didn't go for the Wide Guard last turn, let that Astral Barrage come through, and it's really significant damage. Makes Miraidon quite vulnerable in the future. Won't be able to take another Astral Barrage, and may not be able to take something like an Ivy Cudgel too.
And you have to worry about potential priority as well with the Grassy Glide on that Rillaboom. Puts Miraidon in a difficult spot. Calyrex is just straight away going to go for the Protect here as the Volt Switch comes through from the Miraidon. As you identify, wants to get out of there, protect itself, but also I think critically reset that electric terrain going forward in the match. Volcarona is able to join the fray, a Pokemon that's going to be much better placed to take any potential Grass type damage coming through from this opposing Rillaboom, as Zamazenta can just go straight for the body press. Rillaboom hanging on, however, is free to go for the U-turn, a little bit of chip into that Volcarona, and we see Marco repositioning. It does get the burn, however, but I think the critical thing that Rillaboom's able to do is, even if it can't do a huge amount of damage, it can switch back in later, reset that terrain once Electric Terrain is on the field, and again, as always, apply Fake Out pressure.
Right, still has the Fake Out, but won't be able to threaten nearly as much damage with Grassy Glide. Ogerpon lands in a pretty strong position here, though. It feels like a great spot for Marco to be in. Without that Volcarona having any boost yet, the Calyrex will be the fastest thing to move. It may even be the Ogerpon that moves next. So there's a lot of damage being threatened before anything happens here. There's no redirection or support options available. So the Zamazenta can try to Wide Guard the Calyrex offense, but it's a little bit risky. It could just be a double target into Volcarona in the meantime, and that double target would come through before Volcarona moved. And if you try to position out of that, there's no great way to come into both Psychic and Ivy Cudgel unless it's Incineroar in the back.
Yeah, and even if that Wide Guard comes through, then we know that it's not going to be doing too much damage, so you know that then Ogerpon's free to go for an Ivy Cudgel, try and maybe even deal with Volcarona or the Zamazenta.
Right, lots of options for damage here. Kind of target down either Pokemon is a very difficult spot to be in if you're Eric. Terrestrialization is one way to help, but it's also one way to go out on the attack. Ogerpon, once again, using the Fire Terrestrialization, getting the Embody Aspect boost, getting its attack boosted up.
Yep, dropping its Grass typing as well in the face of this Volcarona, getting itself very ferocious with that attack drop as well. Attack boost even. Calyrex is able to go for the Astral Barrage. No Wide Guard coming through. This is going to do a huge amount of damage, but not enough to be able to get the KO. So it's going to come down to Ogerpon to try and finish the job. Zamazenta's moving first, however, gets the knockout onto the Calyrex in retaliation. So now Ogerpon has a decision. Which Pokemon is it going to be able to get through? Is it going to be the Zamazenta and even out the restricted score? Volcarona, however, is going to be going straight away for this for the Quiver Dance, getting itself all set up into a position where it can be a little bit more threatening, as Ogerpon can go for the Ivy Cudgel. Last but not least, still in the game, removes that Volcarona, despite Eric's best efforts to set it up into an offensive position.
Well, the classic play for Eric of hope your opponent targets into the other side and get the Quiver Dance off scot-free doesn't work this time. The Quiver Dance goes up, but then immediately Volcarona goes down to the Ivy Cudgel. The Ogerpon's slower than we expected. They're moving after both the Volcarona and the Zamazenta on the other side, was still doing its job, getting the KO into Volcarona at the end of the turn. Meanwhile, though, there's a huge advantage in health between these two Zamazentas. The one for Eric is so low at this point, and we just see for the first time Marco's Zamazenta come out on the field perfectly healthy.
I think for the Chimpao as well, it's going to be a little bit of a dicey situation. You're facing down against both Ogerpon and Zamazenta, two Pokemon that can do super effective damage to you.
Zamazenta may even be so low that Grassy Glide is threatening a KO here, which would make it easy for Zamazenta to go after Qianpao. Qianpao really doesn't threaten any damage back into Zamazenta, even has trouble dealing significant damage into Ogerpon. Has to rely on Sucker Punch to do so. Has the crunch, I guess, to do more damage back, but not going to be a 1-hit KO.
Exactly, and I think with Qianpao, you do have that sort of ruin ability on the field that does help out your physical attackers from dealing a bit more damage, but the speed interactions are going to be critical. Qianpao going for the Terrestrialization, however, this is a really nice play in the form that you could potentially be seeing. Body presses come your way, that's now going to be doing no damage at all thanks to being a ghost type, so that gives you a bit of breathing room against the opposing Zamazenta, but you still have to contend with the Ogerpon on the opposing side. Ogerpon, however, was choosing the target of that Zamazenta, so Qianpao can breathe a sigh of relief that is able to make it through this turn and can go for that crunch, doing about just over a third to Ogerpon, but critically getting that drop. Following up into Qianpao, however, I like this from Marco, not going for the body press, trying to read a little bit about Eric's Terrestrialization choices, and is able to get some decent damage on the board there.
Yeah, calling the Terrestrialization successfully there and getting big damage into Qianpao. You don't really have to call it, though. It would be still super effective into the ice type.
Oh, that's true.
Qianpao, and so it just is very safe damage. Meanwhile, I think that crunch defense drop could be significant. It means Qianpao is definitely threatening a KO onto Ogerpon on this turn, and so we see Follow Me, Ogerpon just trying to have an impact by keeping the Zamazenta on the other side safe for now.
Yep, keeps it nice and safe, and there's a nice way to bypass around potential Sucker Punch, but Crunch is all it takes to be able to remove this Terrestrialized Ogerpon from the field. That's going to be going right back to its trainer as Zamazenta on Marco's side, going to be trying to get some damage on the board, but first it has to deal with the Zamazenta on Eric's side. The body press not able to get the KO, and in retaliation, Zamazenta can do it right back to Eric's, meaning Eric is down to his last 2 remaining Pokemon. We are going to see that Miraidon rejoin the field momentarily, but it's going to be the same story for Marco. We're going to see Rillaboom join the fray again.
Right, both players down to their last 2 Pokemon, but means that there will be Grassy Terrain for the rest of this match because the Grassy Surge will activate after Miraidon's ability. Meanwhile, the Qianpao looks fairly vulnerable to a Grassy Glide if it wasn't burnt. The burn is going to probably be enough to keep the Qianpao safe here. The Miraidon will be the first thing moving outside of Fake Out, so you have the option to go for damage into Zamazenta. Meanwhile, Rillaboom can try to disrupt that with Fake Out into Miraidon and force Qianpao to do all of the work on its own. Zamazenta quite low, but with only Dark and Ice moves from Qianpao, it might take more than 2 hits to actually KO the Zamazenta on the other side, which would spell the end. If that's what it takes, then there's just not going to be enough time for Qianpao.
Well, Rillaboom's first job is to slow the fastest Pokemon down on the field with a Fake Out. The Icicle Crash comes into Zamazenta, but does a teeny tiny amount of damage. Zamazenta able to break through, goes for the Miraidon, removes it from the field, and based on what we just saw the Qianpao do to the Zamazenta, it looks like Zamazenta and Rillaboom are going to be able to target down this Qianpao and take Marco Silva that next step closer to the final, to the champion. It's going to be incredible to see.
Yeah, that was just no damage coming out from that Icicle Crash. Should be easy for Zamazenta to just wrap up this game now. Rillaboom doesn't need to contribute. Qianpao can protect itself for a turn, try to get a little bit more health back with Grassy Terrain, but it is inevitable at this point. Marco should be able to punch his ticket into Sunday.
Yep, just going for some protects and going through the motions here towards the end of this particular game. Qianpao going for the protect. Eric knowing there isn't really a lot of wiggle room he has. You have this grassy terrain recovery, but so do the Pokemon on Marco's side. And even though you can contend with the Rillaboom, yes, it has that burn, but with the grassy terrain, it's really not trickling away at it and putting that timer on it that you normally see in a burn situation.
There might be some amount of Icicle Crashes that eventually makes Icicle Crash flinches that eventually makes a difference, but it would take a long time to get there.
There's one.
There's the first.
Yeah, one comes through, but Woodhammer also follows up. Qianpao able to hang on, but unless you can get Icicle Crash after Icicle Crash, and there's not a lot you can do when there's 2 Pokemon, because even if you are targeting down into Zamazenta and you're stopping it from doing any damage, as long as Rillaboom is able to move, then it's going to be able to pick up the KO.
Right, Rillaboom would have had to go down to burn plus recoil there. It does not, so you can protect the return, get a little bit more health back, get some burn damage onto the Rillaboom on the other side, but it still should be inevitable that at some point Marco will get that damage in.
I guess technically if you can stack up a couple of protects on the Qianpao with the burn, Rillaboom will eventually go down. So you have to kind of get through that hurdle and then maybe start going for these icicle crashes and hoping you've got a way to find through that Zamazenta. But that's a very tall order to ask.
Okay, I'm with you though. Just enough multi-protects to get Rillaboom off the field into enough icicle crash flinches to get through Zamazenta. There's a reason you would not want to concede a semifinal match at an international championship if there was any way through. But there it is. The failed protect should spell the end.
He tries it, but Chiampao fails to go for the protect. The Zamazenta can clean it up, and Marco Silva advances to Championship Sunday, the grand finals here at the North American International Championships. It's an all-Italian final. I love to see it. Congratulations, Marco. Commiserations, Eric. But wow, Marco Silva trying to get his 4th international title.
Such an impressive season already and building on it further. Trying to win 2 out of 3 ICs in one season would be just an incredible accomplishment.
There's so many records that he has. You know, he's won a back-to-back international, has been able to defend the title. He's won 2 different international championships and has also won already this season. So he could be not only winning his 4th title, but his 3rd type of title, and then also 2 in one season. Like, those are crazy statistics.
All standalone crazy statistics, all put together in one incredible player.
Absolutely amazing, and it's fantastic to see him performing so well considering the last regional event did not go his way. A little recap of how this match ended out. Eric Rios playing so valiantly with the Zamazenta, but there just was no room for error, and Marco could capitalize on it with these Astral Barrages.
Astral Barrage was putting out so much damage, really softening targets up. It made it easy for Ogerpon and Rillaboom and Zamazenta to clean up the end of the game.
Yeah, Chiampao fought valiantly again as well. These crunches were a really great way to deal with the Ogerpon, but just unfortunately, particularly with that single target damage in a 1 versus 2 situation, it makes it very difficult for Chiampao to come back into the match. Miraidon falling to the opposing Zamazenta just meant that Eric was out of options, out of those big powerhouses that he needs to be able to go through the match, and Marco was able to claim victory.
And the fake out was just slightly mistimed. If Eric had even one